In 1938, a cemetery millionaire built a 50-foot luxury motorhome with air conditioning, a conference room, and an observation deck. It weighed 23,000 pounds. It cost more than 4 houses. And the man who designed the trailer it was based on had been dead for 8 years. Let me explain. To understand the Vagabond, you have to understand 2 men who never met. One was a genius who died at 52 from a blood clot after routine surgery. The other was a visionary who spent his life making death beautiful and got very rich doing it. Somehow, 8 years apart, and from completely different worlds, their obsessions collided in the form of a rolling Art Deco palace that would spend the next 53 years cruising the highways of Southern California without stopping. And the genius was Glenn Hammond Curtis, born May 21, 1878, in Hammondsport, New York. A tiny town wedged between the Finger Lakes with not much going for it except grape vineyards and a kid who could not sit still. His father died when Glenn was 4. His grandfather died the same year. His younger sister went deaf from meningitis at 6. The family had nothing. Glenn had no formal education past the 8th grade. What he had was an obsessive, almost feverish need to understand how things worked and then make them go faster. He started with bicycles, raced them, built them, won championships across western New York. Then he moved to motorcycles. By 1902, at 24 years old, he was manufacturing his own machines under the Hercules brand out of a small workshop in Hammondsport with 3 employees. The Hercules was light, fast, and utterly reliable, and it routinely embarrassed the bigger machines from Indian and Harley-Davidson at races. Curtis loved that. He was not interested in building the most popular motorcycle. He wanted the fastest one. Then he did something genuinely insane. He took a 40-horsepower V8 engine he had designed for powering airships, bolted it into an elongated motorcycle frame, and in January of 1907 rode the thing across the hard-packed sand at Ormond Beach, Florida, 136.3 miles per hour, in 1907, on a motorcycle, with no suspension to speak of, no real brakes, and no helmet. The newspapers gave him a title that stuck: the fastest man on Earth. No car, no train, no airplane, no vehicle of any kind had ever gone that fast. The motorcycle speed record stood until 1930, the year Curtis died. The overall record held until a Blitzen-Benz broke it in 1911. The return run nearly killed him. The universal joint connecting the drive shaft to the rear wheel shattered under the stress, partly buckling the frame and whipping broken metal past his legs at over 100 miles an hour. He walked away. His response, and this tells you everything about the man: riding an 8-cylinder motorcycle is not likely to become very popular. Then he moved on to airplanes because apparently motorcycles were too slow. That move changed everything. Curtis joined Alexander Graham Bell's Aerial Experiment Association and within a year was making history. He won the Scientific American Trophy for the first publicly witnessed flight covering 1 kilometer. He won the Gordon Bennett Trophy in France, the first international air race, carrying his disassembled airplane aboard a ship as personal luggage. He built the JN-4 Jenny, the training aircraft that became the backbone of American military aviation in World War I. His company produced more than 6,400 Jennies, over 2,000 seaplanes, and more than 15,000 engines for the Allied war effort. He designed the first successful American seaplane, trained the Navy's first pilots, and earned the title Father of Naval Aviation. By the end of the war, the Curtis Aeroplane and Motor Company was the largest aircraft manufacturer in the United States. We track down stories like this every week: aircraft, engines, military tech, the machines, and the people behind them. If that is your kind of thing and you have not subscribed yet, now would be a good time. All right. So what does any of this have to do with a luxury motorhome? Everything, actually. After the war, Curtis sold his stock in the aviation company for a reported $32 million and moved to Florida. He threw himself into real estate, buying huge tracts of land and helping develop the cities of Hialeah, Opa-locka, and Miami Springs. He built an Arabian-themed development in Opa-locka with minarets and domed roofs. He built himself a Pueblo-style family home in Miami Springs. The man who had been the fastest human being alive was now a Florida real estate developer, but he had not lost his need to tinker. His frequent hunting trips into the Everglades kept nagging at him. The existing camping equipment was terrible. The trailers were flimsy, unstable, and uncomfortable, and Glenn Curtis could not leave a bad design alone. He had a problem. He loved camping, hunting, and long-distance road travel. And like everything else he touched, he could not leave the existing technology alone. In 1917, he started tinkering with the idea of a better camping trailer. By 1919, he and his half-brother Carl Adams had developed something Curtis called the motor bungalow. It was a solid-walled trailer, a massive upgrade from the canvas tent on wheels that most people used. But the real innovation was underneath. Curtis took an airplane tire, mounted it horizontally on the back of a car, and used it as a self-leveling coupling point for the trailer. Pneumatic cushioning absorbed road shock. The low pivot point kept the trailer stable at speed. He had just invented the fifth-wheel hitch. He called it the aero coupler. The airplane tire absorbed bumps and vibrations from the road. The horizontal mounting allowed the trailer to pivot smoothly, and the whole assembly sat low enough on the tow vehicle to keep the center of gravity stable. The motor bungalow could cruise at 55 miles per hour at a time when many cars topped out around 45. That was unheard of for a trailer. The same basic fifth-wheel concept is used by every semi-truck and luxury fifth-wheel RV on the road today. Most people do not know that. Most people in the RV industry do not know that. The fifth wheel came from an aviation pioneer who wanted a smoother ride on his hunting trips into the Everglades. The motor bungalow was interesting. What came next was something else entirely. In 1928, Curtis took everything he knew about lightweight aircraft construction, aerodynamic design, and luxury interiors and created the Curtis Aero Car. These were not camping trailers. These were rolling estates. Custom-built for wealthy clients who expected the kind of comfort normally found in a Pullman rail car or a private yacht. The bodies used genuine aircraft construction methods. Vertical oak struts and horizontal longerons formed the skeleton. Diagonally crossed nickel-steel airplane truss wires, at each one fitted with a turnbuckle for precise tensioning, gave the structure rigidity without excess weight. The exterior was stretched fabric over tempered masonite panels, light, strong, and from the outside, the Aero cars looked like something between a streamlined horse trailer and a small dirigible. Carl Fisher, the man who co-developed the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and helped build Miami Beach, put it simply, Glenn Curtis has produced the greatest trailer that was ever made in America. The pricing made the exclusivity clear. A conventional travel trailer in the late 20s cost between $300 and $800. A basic Curtis Aerocar started at around $1,000 for the production models built under license in Detroit. But the Florida-built custom models, the ones Curtis personally oversaw from his factory in Opa-locka, ran as high as $8,500. That top figure was more than twice the price of a new American house. Curtis wanted the Aero car to be exclusive, a statement. Most owners did not drive their own rigs. They employed chauffeurs who slept in berths built into the tow vehicle, while the owner entertained guests in the trailer. The Aero cars found customers among the ultra-wealthy and in unexpected places. Airlines used them as ground transportation for passengers. Pan American Airways had Aero cars. Transcontinental Air Transport used them. 4 were delivered to Cuba in December of 1929, including one gifted to President Gerardo Machado to strengthen business ties between Havana and Florida. Traveling salespeople used them as mobile showrooms. At least one was converted into a mobile zoo. They served as offices, guest houses, hospital transport vehicles, and hunting lodges on wheels. Then Glenn Curtis died. July 23, 1930, 52 years old. He was traveling to Rochester, New York for a court case when appendicitis struck. Emergency surgery in Buffalo. It seemed to go well. 2 days later, a blood clot killed him. The man who had survived a motorcycle disintegrating under him at 136 miles per hour was killed by his own appendix. He was buried back in Hammondsport, in Pleasant Valley Cemetery, not far from the field where his June bug had made the first publicly witnessed flight in America 22 years earlier. The motorcycle that made him the fastest man on Earth went to the Smithsonian. Production of the Aero car continued under license at factories in Michigan and Florida. The Depression hit sales hard, and the pricing that Curtis had insisted on did not help. Estimates vary, but somewhere between 300 and 1,000 Aero cars were built before production ended around 1940 or 41. Today, fewer than a dozen survive. Only 1 or 2 are functional. One restored example sits on permanent display at the Glenn H. Curtis Museum in Hammondsport. But another one, the most famous of them all, spent half a century doing something no one expected, working now. Meet Hubert Eaton. Born June 3, 1881, Liberty, Missouri, mining engineer by training, Baptist lay minister by conviction, businessman by instinct. In 1912, Eaton took a job managing sales at a failing cemetery in Tropico, California, a small community that would later be absorbed into Glendale, just outside Los Angeles. By 1914, he was running the whole operation. The place was in terrible shape, crumbling headstones, dead grass, the kind of cemetery that made people walk faster on the way out. Eaton looked at this depressing piece of real estate and had an idea that would change an entire industry. He hated traditional cemeteries, called them unsightly stone yards. His plan was radical and, to the established funeral industry, borderline heretical. Rip out the headstones, all of them, replace them with flat bronze plaques set flush to the ground, so the lawns swept unbroken from one end of the property to the other. Plant trees, add fountains, commission sculpture and stained glass. Build chapels and exhibition halls. Create a place that people actually wanted to visit. A park that celebrated life rather than a graveyard that mourned death. He called his concept the Memorial Park. The funeral directors called it sacrilege. Eaton called it progress. By 1917, Forest Lawn Cemetery had been renamed Forest Lawn Memorial Park, and Eaton was referring to himself as the builder. Within 2 decades, his concept had been adopted by every major cemetery in the United States and many in Europe. Forest Lawn became the most famous burial ground in America, the place where Hollywood laid its legends to rest. Clark Gable, Humphrey Bogart, Spencer Tracy, Jimmy Stewart, Elizabeth Taylor, Lucille Ball, eventually Michael Jackson. Over 50,000 weddings were performed on the grounds, including the marriage of Ronald Reagan and Jane Wyman in 1940. Walt Disney became a close personal friend of Eaton's and was later named an honorary pallbearer at his funeral. By the late 1930s, Eaton was running a growing empire of memorial parks across Southern California, multiple locations, a board of directors, executives who needed to inspect properties, attend meetings, and travel between sites. Eaton needed to move between them efficiently, but not in a car, not in a way that wasted time. He needed to work while traveling, and he needed to do it in a way that projected exactly the kind of success and luxury that his memorial parks embodied. Because Eaton understood something fundamental about business: you have to look successful to be successful. The cemetery magnate thought like a showman. He wanted a vehicle that could serve as a mobile office for board meetings at highway speed, with a full kitchen, a bathroom featuring a shower and hot running water, air conditioning, a technology that barely existed in buildings in 1938, let alone vehicles, an observation deck so he could watch the road and stay in control even while his chauffeur drove. And the whole thing needed to look like it had rolled off the floor of a World's Fair pavilion. He had almost certainly seen the Zephyrland yacht. This was the height of the streamlining craze in American design. Every manufacturer was trying to make vehicles look like they were moving even when standing still, inspired by aircraft and zeppelins. Chrysler had launched the Airflow. Haney Auburn and Cord were building some of the most beautiful cars ever made. And coach builders, the custom shops that would build anything for anyone with enough cash, were pushing the concept even further. If you were rich enough, you could commission a vehicle that looked like it had been designed in a wind tunnel. In 1936, the industrial designer Brooks Stevens had been commissioned by William Woods Plankinton, Jr., a young millionaire heir to a Milwaukee meatpacking fortune and freelance photographer for the New York Journal-American, to build a luxury tractor-trailer for cross-country travel. Stevens, just opening his first design office, delivered a masterpiece. A streamlined, blimp-nosed cab-forward tractor based on an International Harvester chassis, pulling a Curtiss Aerocar trailer that had been completely reimagined. The trailer slept 9, with a kitchen, shower, radio equipment, and quarters for a butler and a valet. The driver got his own compartment in the tractor. On a test run in '36, Stevens and the crew stopped at a friend's house for cocktails in the trailer. An executive from the Western Printing Company knocked on the door, saw the interior, and immediately commissioned Stevens to build a mobile showroom for his company. That is the kind of impression this thing made. Eaton saw it and thought, bigger, better, mine. He went to Standard Carriage Works of Los Angeles, a coach builder that specialized in truck bodies and commercial vehicles, and commissioned something that had never existed before. A custom-designed streamlined tractor, permanently mated to a top-of-the-line Curtiss Aerocar trailer. The result was the Vagabond. The tractor started as a 1938 REO cab-forward chassis. REO was the truck company founded by Ransom E. Olds after he left Oldsmobile in 1904, named with his initials because Oldsmobile threatened to sue over the use of his full name. By '38, REO was struggling. They had abandoned passenger cars 2 years earlier, reorganized with a $2 million government loan, and were surviving on truck sales in the 5 to 10-ton range. But their chassis were tough, and Standard Carriage Works took one and made it unrecognizable. The cab-forward layout placed the driver ahead of the engine. The body was aluminum and leatherette, sculpted into a sweeping aerodynamic shell, with Art Deco pontoon fenders that had no business being on a working commercial vehicle. The design is attributed to Harold H. Robinson, and it looked less like a truck than a streamlined locomotive that had been miniaturized for the highway. Under the skin, the engineering was just as unusual. The main powertrain was a white flat 12 truck engine mounted at the rear of the tractor, producing 212 horsepower. Not a V12, a flat 12. A bus engine. For reference, the average American car in 1938 made about 85 horsepower and weighed around 3,000 pounds. The Vagabond's complete rig, tractor, and permanently attached Aerocar trailer weighed 23,000 pounds and stretched just under 50 feet. The wheelbase alone measured 30 feet. A Williams air brake system handled stopping duties. Dual rear wheels spread the load of the 10,000-pound trailer across the road surface. Separate from the main engine, a dedicated 4-cylinder engine provided auxiliary power for the onboard systems, generators, lighting, the air conditioning compressor. This meant the trailer's systems could run independently of whether the vehicle was moving. You could park the Vagabond in a lot, shut down the main engine, and still have a fully powered air-conditioned boardroom. The trailer itself was a custom Curtiss Aero car built at the Curtiss facility in Coral Gables, Florida, not off the shelf. Top of the line, modified specifically to Eaton's requirements. The interior was configured as a mobile executive suite. Seating for 8 people in a conference room and lounge arrangement, walls paneled in warm-toned wood, blue plush upholstery, and matching carpet throughout. A full kitchen with a full-size refrigerator, a sink with hot and cold running water, and counter space. A complete bathroom with a shower, individual reading lights at each seat, cup holders, ashtrays built into the armrests, and air conditioning throughout, in a vehicle, in 1938, when most American homes did not have air conditioning. But the real showpiece was the observation deck at the front of the trailer. Eaton had it equipped with a compass, a speedometer, and an intercom system for direct communication with the driver in the tractor. The trailer carried its own set of rear-view mirrors and windshield wipers. A deluxe cupola, an elevated viewing area that Curtiss had developed for later model Aero cars, gave passengers a commanding panoramic view of the road ahead. You could sit in a chair, drink coffee brewed in the onboard kitchen, watch the California highway unroll through the observation window, pick up the intercom, and tell your chauffeur to take the next exit toward Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills, while your board of directors reviewed burial plot revenue at the conference table behind you. In 1938. Now, the cost. Average American income that year, $1,731. A new car, $860. A new house, $3,900. A standard Aero car trailer alone cost upward of $5,000. The complete Vagabond, with its one-of-one custom REO tractor, bespoke coachwork, the top-tier Aero car, the auxiliary engine, and the air conditioning. The exact figure is lost, but based on comparable custom builds, it almost certainly exceeded $10,000. Roughly 6 years of the average worker's income during the Depression for a vehicle that required its own chauffeur. Eaton named it the Vagabond, and then he did something almost nobody does with a vehicle this expensive and this impractical. He used it every single day. Forest Lawn put the Vagabond into continuous service in 1938. Eaton used it to travel between his memorial parks as the chain expanded. Forest Lawn Glendale, Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills, which opened in the early 50s on land that had once been used to film All Quiet on the Western Front and several Charlie Chaplin comedies. Forest Lawn Cypress, Forest Lawn Covina Hills. Each one needed inspections, board meetings, executive transport. The Vagabond handled all of it. Eaton also used the rig for hunting excursions and to impress visiting dignitaries and business partners. At some point, he removed the sleeping quarters from the trailer entirely and converted the full interior into a dedicated mobile boardroom. The Vagabond was no longer a recreational vehicle. It was Forest Lawn's rolling corporate headquarters, and it stayed that way for decades. Think about what that means for the engineering. This was not a vehicle that got driven on sunny weekends and parked in a climate-controlled garage. It was a daily-use 50-foot, 23,000-pound commercial vehicle grinding through the hills and emerging freeway systems of Southern California, Los Angeles traffic, mountain grades, summer heat. And it just kept going. The original white 12-cylinder engine ran for over 250,000 miles before it finally gave out in 1953. 15 years, 250,000 miles, hauling 23,000 pounds. That is a testament to the white engine, to whoever maintained it, and to the REO chassis underneath. When the Flat 12 died, Forest Lawn did not retire the rig. They did not even hesitate. They pulled the old engine and replaced it with a 300-horsepower Cummins 6-cylinder diesel. The Cummins was a workhorse engine, the same family of power plants that was becoming the backbone of the American trucking industry. And it ran for another 38 years. Eaton died in 1966, 85 years old. or entombed in the Memorial Court of Honor in the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn, Glendale, the very building he designed. The Vagabond outlived its creator by 25 years. Forest Lawn finally retired it in 1991. 53 years of continuous service, 2 engines, 250,000 miles on the first one alone. In '98, Forest Lawn donated the Vagabond to the Peterson Automotive Museum on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. The Peterson is one of the premier automotive museums in the country, home to some of the rarest and most significant vehicles in the world. The Vagabond sat in storage and on occasional loan display for nearly 2 decades. It was too big for most exhibition spaces, too unusual to fit neatly into any collection category. Not a car, not a truck, not an RV in any conventional sense. A 50-foot Art Deco anomaly. Then, in 2017, the Peterson put it on the auction block on eBay, not running. The Cummins diesel had been sitting dead since '91. The interior was aging, but largely intact, wood paneling still on the walls. Blue upholstery, faded but present. The Art Deco pontoon fenders still sweeping along the sides of the tractor. Those enormous side-view mirrors, which at some point had been upgraded from the original tiny units to full West Coast truck mirrors, still bolted in place. 50 feet of irreplaceable, one-of-a-kind history sitting on a back lot. It sold for $137,000. That number deserves a moment. $137,000. For context, that is less than a new mid-range Class A motorhome. It is less than most restored classic cars at any major auction. A 1969 Camaro in good condition can fetch more than that. A decent Porsche 911 from the 1970s sells for more than that. This was a one-of-one, custom-built Art Deco luxury land yacht with a boardroom, an observation deck, air conditioning that predated most home systems, and a verified service record spanning more than 5 decades. The market shrugged. But someone noticed. A year later, the Vagabond appeared at the 2018 AACA Fall Meet in Hershey, Pennsylvania. A truck mechanic had gotten the REO running again. The trailer had cosmetic work. It drove under its own power. 80 years old. The Vagabond connects 2 worlds that should never have intersected. Glenn Curtis, the 8th grade dropout who became the fastest man alive, invented the 5th-wheel hitch because he wanted better camping trips and built trailers too expensive for anyone but millionaires. Hubert Eaton, the cemetery magnate who turned grief into art and needed a rolling boardroom to run his empire of beautiful graves. Curtis never knew Eaton. He had been dead 8 years. But his aero car became the foundation of a machine that outlived them both. Today, the RV industry generates over $40 billion a year. Millions of 5th-wheel trailers are on American highways, hauled by pickup trucks to campgrounds and national parks from coast to coast. Every single one of them traces its hitch design back to Glenn Curtis and that pneumatic airplane tire he bolted to the back of a car in 1919. The aero coupler became the 5th wheel. The 5th wheel became an industry, and the man who invented it did not live to see any of it take off. The Curtiss-Wright Corporation, formed from the merger of Curtiss's aviation company with the Wright brothers firm in 1929, still exists today. The Glenn H. Curtiss Museum in Hammondsport, New York, has one of the only fully restored aero cars on permanent display, along with the motorcycle collection and aviation artifacts that tell the story of a man who could not stop inventing. But the Vagabond is the aero car that survived the real world, not preserved behind glass from the beginning, not lovingly stored in a heated garage, a machine that hauled executives through Los Angeles traffic for half a century, burned through 2 engines, carried a cemetery magnate's board of directors to meetings they could have held in an office, and then sold at auction for less than a sports car. And there you have it, a cemetery magnate, an aviation pioneer who died before the project started, a 50-foot rolling boardroom that outlived them both and sold for the price of a mid-range pickup. If you have seen one of these, or you know where the Vagabond ended up after Hershey, put it in the comments. And if you made it this far, subscribe. More coming next week.